going to go into carbohydrate content for weight loss. What is the role that carbohydrates play during the weight loss journey? Like I said, in medical weight loss for Australians, is it essential to go low carb, no carb, or zero carb? I don't think that that is the answer for most people, because I think what is actually more important is finding a sustainable approach to weight management. I see a lot of people who tend to try low carb, zero carb, or no carb for a couple of weeks, and what they find is that it is quite restrictive. They can't seem to find many foods that fit that criteria, and it's not that easy to socialize with other people, and they get some results, but they're not always sustainable results. What does it also mean in terms of the products that we choose to support us for weight loss or weight maintenance? When I teach patients about carbohydrates and when I teach them about weight maintenance, I like to teach them in terms of core principles. And some of the core principles that we think about are complex versus simple. So let's use bread as an example. Everyone knows about bread, and some people think, oh no, bread, you can't have bread when you're trying to lose weight. Bread is a bad food. Bread is a carbohydrate. But when it comes to bread, there are lots of different varieties. We've got white bread, we've got brown bread, we've got whole grain bread, seeded bread, sourdough bread. Bread is actually not a bad food. We do have all of these different types of bread, and we know that the more complex the type of bread, the more seeded, the more whole grain, the better it is that it's going to be for you, and all you really need to do is to stick to one serving. Another core principle that I tend to teach patients is the glycemic index, and the glycemic index is the rate at which the sugars are released into your system. When foods have a high GI or a high glycemic index, it means that the sugars are released very quickly and then they crash very quickly as well. So you want to try to avoid foods that have a high GI, particularly in the evening, because that will mean that you're going to be having a sugar rush and then you're going to be sleeping on a really high sugar level. You do want to be aiming for fruits or types of foods that have a lower GI, because these are ones that are going to give you sustained levels of energy over a longer period of time. Does that mean that high GI fruits, vegetables, foods are bad for you? Not necessarily. They can just be timed in different parts of the day. High GI foods are sometimes great for bursts of energy. So sometimes people will have high GI foods for morning tea, or sometimes they will have them for pre-workout, for example. So sometimes fruit gets a bad rep, and people will say, am I even allowed to have fruit when I'm trying to lose weight? Fruit has fruit sugars. Can I have that? And the truth is that it would be much better for you to have fruit than to have discretionary type foods that contain simple carbohydrates. Fruit as a whole fruit containing the skin has fiber. It also has vitamins and minerals and other essential nutrients. The sugars inside fruit are still much better for you than the fruit that is inside a lot of processed discretionary foods. So I still try to get my patients to have 2 serves of fruit per day. Let's use fruit as an example to think about a high glycemic index versus a low glycemic index. An example of a fruit that has a high glycemic index is watermelon. So watermelon is a fruit that has a high glycemic index. You don't eat the skin. You tend to just eat the inside of the watermelon, and it is sweet and watery. So you're not really getting much fiber to digest at the same time. So it makes sense that you just have a rush of sugar and then it tends to crash afterwards. So water is a high glycemic index fruit, and it would be great to have as a pre-workout. It's also very hydrating as well. On the other hand, apple is a fruit that has a low glycemic index. And when you're eating an apple, particularly when you're eating it with the skin on the outside as well, that is high in fiber. So apple will give you a nice steady rise and a steady fall in your sugar levels. So using watermelon and using apple, you can kind of understand the differences in the glycemic index. The other core principle that I teach patients when it comes to carbohydrates is the portion size as well. And and Bo and I like to use the plate method when it comes to carbohydrates. So what do I mean by that? When we think about carbohydrates, we think about cutting the plate into a few different portions. First of all, cut your plate into half, and half of your plate should be full of rainbow fruits and vegetables, always. So that is the first thing that you're going to have. The second thing that you're going to have is a quarter of your plate is going to have a palm-sized serving of your protein just here, and you're going to also have a fist-sized serving of your carbohydrates just here, and a tiny thumb-sized serving of your healthy fats. So that might be something like avocado, or it might be something like extra virgin olive oil. So anytime that you are trying to portion out your carbohydrates, it should be no more than a quarter of your plate, or about a fist-sized serving. And that fist-sized serving can include something like bread, potatoes, rice, or starchy vegetables. So I hope that that helps you to have some core principles when it comes to carbohydrates. So I hope everyone had a fun day on carbohydrates for weight loss. Hope you learned something, and I will see you at the next event. Bye everyone.